I never imagined my shy mistake at that VIP table would lead to a heartbreaking confrontation. I still remember the way my heart raced as I walked into that exclusive club, the pulse of the bass vibrating through my body like a warning bell. The air was thick with perfume and anticipation. Conversation swirled around me like a whirlwind, and I felt so small that I was out of place, a fish in a sea of sharks. My hands trembled as I clutched my drink, the icy glass slick against my palm. I could taste the sharp bitterness of my cocktail, but my throat was too tight to swallow. I scanned the room, searching for a familiar face in the crowd. All I saw were glimmering dresses and polished shoes, laughter echoing off the walls, a language I didn't understand. It was then I noticed him, tall, brooding, a storm hidden behind his striking blue eyes. I couldn't help but stare, caught in the allure of his presence. I felt my cheeks flush. Was it the heat of the room or the effect he had on me? He glanced my way, and for a fleeting moment, our eyes locked. That instant sparked something like electricity. My heart pounded as I turned my gaze down, focusing on the swirling ice in my glass, hiding my face from his piercing stare. In that vulnerable moment, I reached out, partly out of curiosity, partly shyness, and accidentally knocked his drink over. It happened in slow motion. His expression shifted from intrigue to disbelief, then bursting into a blind rage that shattered the atmosphere like glass. The room grew quiet. The murmurs fell flat. All eyes were on us. I felt their stares, stabbing like daggers. His drink cascaded down the front of his designer shirt, dark liquid pooling at his waist. I wanted to fade away, to become invisible. A wisp of smoke curled up into the ceiling. "Are you serious?" he snapped, bitterness coating each word. The crowd leaned in, relishing the unfolding drama. My heart felt like it was slipping through my fingers, sliding into a pit of shame. I opened my mouth to apologize, but nothing came out, only a choked noise, barely a whisper. His friends behind him erupted with laughter, mocking, pointing fingers, and the laughter rang hollow to my ears. I thought of leaving, slipping away into the night, but I was frozen in place, rooted by embarrassment and fear. What should have been a simple mistake had transformed into a personal disaster. I could see the disbelief fading from his eyes, replaced with something else, something darker. I braced myself, knowing it was coming, but still unprepared for the venom in his next words. "You're pathetic," he said, each syllable sharp like a knife cutting through my already frayed emotions. The lump in my throat solidified, stinging like salt on an open wound. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to defend myself, something, anything. Instead, all I could manage was a small, devastated nod. Behind me, the whispered gossip simmered, a dangerous undercurrent that only intensified my isolation. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and I spotted the shadowy figure of the club owner weaving through the crowd, a looming presence with an air of authority. He had a reputation, whispers said. He liked to settle debts and disputes swiftly. The sudden tension kicked the air out of my lungs. I wanted to look away but couldn't. My world had narrowed to that singular moment, thick with anticipation, despair, and the bitter taste of humiliation. What would happen next? Would he escalate this beyond words? The very air ached with the question. I felt my heart hammering in my chest, a repetitive warning of chaos about to unfold. Everything hung in the balance, and I was caught in the storm. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The tension hung like a thick fog in the air, wrapping around me like chains, each whispered comment and mocking glance further tightening the grip on my heart. I couldn't breathe. My world had shrunk to the size of my forehead, where sweat pooled as I willed myself to disappear. In the corner of my mind, a small voice echoed, desperately reminding me that it was just a drink, a moment of clumsiness. But with every second that ticked by, the humiliation deepened. As the club owner approached, I noticed a glimmer of something unexpected in the crowd. A woman, draped in a red sequined dress, stepped forward. Her face bore a look of sympathy that momentarily pierced through my shame. Her lip curled ever so slightly, as if she were willing to defend me from the imminent chaos about to unravel. "Come on, it was an accident," she said, her voice rising above the mocking laughter like a lifeline thrown into tumultuous waters. Her intervention caught the attention of the man who had ignited this firestorm. His eyes flickered between her face and mine, and for a brief moment, I hoped he would relent, would allow my shame to fade into the shadows of the club. But he snarled, "Stay out of this. This pathetic little girl needs to learn her place." Every word felt like a blow. His friends hooted, egging him on. I felt tears prick my eyes, fighting against the urge to tear away into the night. The laughter resonated, a mocking symphony that played endlessly in my head. But just then, the club owner, a statuesque man with a chiseled jaw and a knowing glance, approached. I prepared myself for condemnation, but instead, he spoke with calm authority. "Let her go," he commanded, and I felt the crowd's energy shift, the focus now on him instead of my humiliation. "This is a place for enjoyment, not cruelty." That a small flicker of hope ignited within me as I recognized the measure of kindness in his tone. But that tiny flicker was quickly drowned by the infamous gravity of the VIP section's rage. The dark-haired man, consumed by his own pride, turned on the owner, defensively asserting his status. "Who do you think you are? You don't dictate our fun," he challenged, emanating an air of rebellion that fizzled against the authority before him. The owner raised an eyebrow, the tension between them palpable enough to slice through. "You're forgetting that this is my club," he replied, unflinching. "I won't allow you to bully anyone here." That I barely had time to process this shift before the man shot me one last, seething glare. "Just wait," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "You'll regret this." With that, his entourage, still cackling, drifted away, leaving me standing with the weight of the world pulling at my shoulders. I felt the sting of tears threatening to break free, but the owner turned toward me, his presence as solid as a lighthouse in a storm. "You okay?" he asked, genuine concern etched across his handsome features. I nodded, my voice caught in my throat, not trusting it wouldn't betray me with sobs. A warmth began to spread in my chest, the remembrance of unexpected kindness in the chaos. "Thank you," I managed to choke out, overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude amid the wreckage. "It happens to everyone at least once," he assured, his smile gentle, an anchor in my turmoil. But as I steeled myself for an exit, the red-dressed woman approached, her expression softer now, revealing a depth I had missed before. "Here, take this," she said, handing me a crisp business card. "If you ever need someone to talk to, don't hesitate." When I glanced down, the name on the card was familiar. Vanessa Lark, a highly regarded event planner known for her charm and connections. You're her?" I questioned, a mix of disbelief and hope swelling within me. I had attended several of her dazzling parties, each dreamlike and enchanting. She nodded, the sparkle in her eyes reflecting the compassion that she exuded. "Yes, and trust me, nobody deserves to be treated that way. Hang on to this," she said earnestly. "You never know when you might need someone to advocate for you." Just then, the moment was shattered by an explosive crash at the bar. Glass shattered dramatically across the polished floor, and my heart skipped a beat as I turned. A fight had broken out, fists flying, fueled by adrenaline and liquid bravado. My heart raced faster than I thought possible, my breaths coming in sharp gasps. Amidst the chaos, the brooding man reappeared in the scrum of bodies, fury etched in his expression, eyes sparking as he scanned the scene. And there was something in his gaze, a mix of vulnerability, rage, and maybe fear, all wrapped in the mask of his arrogance. The realization hit me hard. This confrontation was far from over. The spark of unexpected kindness I had felt moments ago was threatened by the tumult and debris of unresolved conflict that surrounded me. As the fists continued to fly and the club erupted in chaos, I felt my world narrow again. Who would emerge unscathed from this spiraling storm? Would I ever find refuge from the storm that was my life? Would kindness be enough in the face of this relentless tide? And then, before I could formulate an answer, he turned and locked his gaze on Maya's stormy blue eyes, holding a whisper of something I could not yet decipher. As the chaos thrummed around us, a new silence fell between us, thick with uncharted tension and the promise of what was yet to come. The chaos enveloped me as a whirlpool of emotions surged. Every sound shouting, glass clinking, bodies colliding amplified my heartbeat, a frantic drum urging me to flee yet anchoring me in place. I could hardly breathe, teetering on the edge of panic, until his eyes pierced through the commotion, turning my fear into a strange blend of curiosity and dread. "Why are you still here?" It was a question that echoed in my mind like a siren's call. My feet trembled, the instinct to escape battling against a magnetic pull that kept me rooted where I stood. I had expected a confrontation filled with fury and rage, but instead, his gaze held something quietly unsettling in unguarded introspection that invited me into a world I didn't want to enter. As the brawl escalated, the owner moved to break up the fight, his commanding voice cutting through the din. "Enough. This is not why you come here," he bellowed, but it only seemed to aggravate the aggressors, more fists flying as tempers boiled over. I felt an urgency growing in my chest, the need to do something, yet fear clamped my throat like a vice. Through the throng of bodies, I caught sight of Vanessa again. Her expression had transformed from sympathetic to resolute. She began making her way toward the fray, her heels clicking determinedly against the floor. I thought she might be foolish, but something about her spirit struck a chord. Perhaps in my heartache, I had forgotten what it felt like to Dorito step forward when things seemed utterly chaotic. My resolve faltered as I watched her closely, wishing for courage or a clarity that eluded me. Just then, a loud thud echoed in the club, the punch that echoed as it landed. The crowd gasped, and I instinctively recoiled, my heart racing with the fear that someone would get seriously hurt. "Vanessa, wait." I finally managed to stammer, pushing through the crowd toward her, feeling drawn into her current of strength. I reached her just as she was barely able to catch the attention of the club staff, who were trying to revive order. "Don't," she urged me firmly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "This isn't your battle." But a fire ignited within me, one that whispered of the injustice I had faced moments ago, of the shame that hadn't yet lifted. "But if I don't speak up, who will?" I replied, my voice trembling but assertive, surprising myself. Vanessa squeezed my shoulder reassuringly, her confidence reverberating through me. "Then let's find a way together." With that, we broke through the ring of spectators encircling the brawl, and a sense of purpose flooded through me. I glared at the fracas, my earlier humiliation faded into the background noise of my thoughts. Then, like a scene from a Stark movie playing out in slow motion, the dark-haired man turned again, his expression chilling as he caught my eye. This time, however, his underlying rage morphed into something deeper, almost reflective. His fierce demeanor flickered, revealing shadows of confusion underlying the bravado. "Why do you care?" he shouted at me, his words dripping with sarcasm. But there was a vulnerability behind his bravado, an emotion just beneath the surface that made him appear more human. I took a step closer, my heart pounding relentlessly as I considered how to respond. "Because nobody should feel like they're less than anyone else," I said, my words spilling out before I could rein them in. The club fell silent for a brief moment, the violence halting as curiosity rippled through the crowd. Those nearby turned to me, their eyes wide, caught between wanting to witness a spectacle and the realization that a reckoning was unfolding. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he shot back, his bravado fractured, eyes narrowing dangerously, yet there was a hint of something softer in the creases of his brow. And then it hit me, a recognition that this man was not merely a bully cloaked in swagger, but someone carrying the weight of expectations that were suffocating him. "I'm nobody," I replied, my voice steady, "but you should really think about who you want to be." For a heartbeat, time froze. His blue eyes bore into mine, a whirlpool of conflict, shame, and something resembling curiosity. The tension hung heavy, laden with unspoken truths and uncharted paths. All around us, the people waited, breaths caught, uncertain if they were observers or participants. Then, just as I thought he might respond, the club owner intervened again, physically stepping closer. "This isn't the way," he said firmly, his gaze flickering between us. The moment shattered, and the tumult of the chaotic night rushed back in. I felt a surge of frustration ripple through my body, having dared to breach the thick veneer of misunderstanding encasing us. A chance to break free from the cycle of animosity simmered on the surface, and I could hardly grasp what I wanted to say next before it all spiraled into confusion once more. "Enough!" Someone shouted from the back, followed by an explosion of voices echoing through the club. I turned to see a group of regulars, all familiar faces who had come to enjoy the moment, their unified support sending a wave of unexpected warmth through me. But before I could process the implications, someone from the far corner of the bar unleashed an alarming cry, a scream that sent chills rippling down my spine. "I've got it! The debt!" A well-dressed man, his eyes wide, watched the scene unfold with shock and a realization that twisted the air around us, transforming the moment into something much darker than I ever anticipated. And just like that, as the tide turned ominously, I felt the remnants of tranquility slip away, replaced with cold dread. What had we unraveled? What deeper currents of chaos lay beneath the surface, concealed by broken facades? The last strands of courage I'd gathered were up against a frightening revelation, and as I stood there, caught between fear and awe, the night tinged with the taste of uncertainty and heartbreak, the chain reaction had begun, and there was no telling where it would lead. The atmosphere thickened like fog, the tension palpable as I grasped the weight of the well-dressed man's words. "The debt," he had said, and it echoed in my mind like a warning bell tolling in the distance. I felt the collective breath of the spectators hitch a shared understanding that something far more sinister lurked beneath the surface of the night's chaos. "What debt?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling as I searched the faces around me, each reflecting snippets of curiosity and concern. But the well-dressed man simply shook his head, his expression darkening as if he had stumbled upon a secret that should have stayed buried. "Seems like someone's in deeper trouble than we thought," he muttered, barely loud enough for those nearby to hear. His words pulled me further into a whirlpool of uncertainty, every fiber of my being screaming for answers, yet aware that digging deeper could expose hidden dangers I wasn't prepared to face. As panic began to burgeon in my chest, I turned towards Vanessa, seeking refuge in her familiar resolve. She looked back at me, her expression a mix of concern and determination, and I could sense her willing me to stay strong when everything felt ready to unravel. "We need to get out of here," she said firmly, her eyes never leaving mine. But I was paralyzed, my eyes still locked on the dark-haired man, who now looked more like a scared child than a fierce adversary. He seemed to be trapped in his own turmoil, and when our gazes met, a flicker of understanding passed between us, as if he too felt the heavy weight of the night pressing down on our shoulders, pulling us deeper into its abyss. "Stay back," he yelled suddenly, his voice slicing through the fraught tension, and my heart raced anew. "This is my fight," he directed at the well-dressed man and gestured toward the shouts around him, anger surging once again in his tone, as if to fend off the vulnerability that threatened to resurface. It was a desperate attempt to maintain control over the chaos that lingered on the periphery, but the rawness stripped away his bravado that I wanted to scream, to shout that no one needed to fight, and that we should unite against the specters of judgment and expectation instead. But my voice got lost in the roar, overshadowed by the pounding music and the restless energy of the crowd that had turned momentarily electric with curiosity. "Just leave it," Vanessa insisted, tugging at my arm, sensing my conflict. "This isn't our fight," she repeated, urgency slicing through her voice, as she pulled me backward through the growing cluster of bodies. The moment felt surreal, caught between my instinct to help and the gnawing fear of getting swallowed by the same darkness enfolding the brawl. I hesitated, but just as I felt the heat of retreat take hold, the well-dressed man shouted something again that made me freeze. "We've all done things we regret. This isn't just about you, man. You owe more than just cash." There was a stillness that followed, the kind that always hints at an impending storm, and I felt the air crackle with a tension that simultaneously ignited hope and dread. The dark-haired man's expression shifted from rage to one of confusion, the realization crashing over him like waves on a shore. Had this been the debt he had been carrying? The weight of inevitability dropped heavily, making my heart leap in recognition of a truth that had lingered tantalizingly close. Suddenly, a group of men in tailored suits entered the club, their presence stealing the spotlight from the escalating conflict. There you are? One of them boomed, eyes locking on the dark-haired man, who flinched as if struck. We've been looking for you. Those words unfurled a panic I couldn't name, and I felt my insides twist with a mix of empathy and fear. Who were these men, and what claim did they have over him? Their demeanor spoke of authority, the kind that stirred both anger and a desperate need for answers in my chest. Leave me alone. The dark-haired man shouted back at them, his voice breaking, tremors displaying a deeper vulnerability as he stood his ground. My heart ached for him, for the turmoil that spilled from him like an open wound. Not until we settle things, Blake. You know the terms, one of the men said coolly, and I could see the shadows of the past reflected in the man's eyes, torn between the weight of responsibility and the desire for freedom from a burden that was never his to carry. That I in that moment. Uncertainty knotted my stomach. Was this debt more than just financial? The air felt electric with revelations yet to come, each potential truth sharper than glass and more painful to touch. I could almost feel the vulnerability we all shielded ourselves with, the bits of our lives we tried to manage but could no longer contain. That I turned back to Vanessa, the dread in my gut deepening, and whispered, I can't just walk away from this. Vanessa's determined eyes softened, her grip on my arm loosening. Then what are you going to do? Before I could answer, a sudden confrontation erupted, bodies pushing and shoving, and I caught sight of the dark-haired man being cornered against the wall, desperation swirling in his eyes. Please, he begged, a plea wasted on the fervor of his aggressors. A visceral pull urged me forward, the warm touch of borrowed strength urging me to act when I felt so powerless. And just as I pushed through the crowd surrounding the fray, a deafening crack shattered the night, a gunshot piercing through the music, silencing every last whisper, leaving only the raw pulse of my heart against the abyss of uncertainty. In that instant, everything spiraled into chaos. I staggered back, stunned by the suddenness, the primal fear taking hold. And through the shouts of alarm, one thought crystallized in my mind. There would be no more running from this moment. And as the fear consumed me, I could sense only a heart-wrenching truth looming before us. A confrontation faced not just with fists, but with the painful opacity of our own hidden scars. Defining choices loomed, and as I locked eyes with the dark-haired man one last time, the feeling of fate closing in around us felt inescapable. The consequences of our actions had finally caught up to us, and in the deafening silence that followed, I braced myself for the revelation that would change everything. The world around me transformed into a blur of shouting voices, clattering glasses, and the frantic rush of bodies as the weight of the gunshot echoed in my ears. I felt like I was submerged underwater, every sound muffled and distant, the chaos above a distorted symphony of dread. Vanessa's grip on my arm tightened, her face a mask of shock and fear. Get down, she screamed, yanking me as if that could somehow shield us from the madness unfolding. I stumbled, instinctively ducking behind a marble pillar, but my eyes remained locked on Blake, the dark-haired man whose turmoil had swept through the room like wildfire. That he stood frozen, the color draining from his face as he processed the moment, the gunshot that had brought the world crashing down. But in that moment of chaos, I saw a shift within him, a flicker of something fierce kindling behind his fear. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a man standing at the precipice of a decision that could define his future. That I longed to reach him, to somehow break through the barrier of terror that enveloped us both. But the crowd was scattering, panic morphing into frenzied energy. I could see the suited men shifting as well, their expressions sharpening into urgent predatory masks. Their intentions were clear. If Blake couldn't escape, none of us would. Stay here, Vanessa hissed, her voice trembling, yet firm as she pushed me further back against the pillar. I could see the shifting shadow of the raging fury threading through her eyes. But this fear wasn't just for us. There was a deep concern for Blake, for the consequences that could spiral out of control in seconds. Beneath the tempest of the moment, amid the chaos of fleeing spectators, I felt a strange, desperate urge rise within me, commanding me to act. But I hesitated, knowing the danger that lay ahead. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of the suited men moving closer, their hands ready to draw upon hidden weapons. No, I breathed, panic threatening to siphon my voice away. And then, as if a cruel twist of fate intended to seal our fates, I saw the well-dressed man take a step forward, his intent shifting from intimidation to confrontation, his mouth moving, but I could not hear his words. That's when Blake surged, his deep-set eyes ignited with determination. "I'm not going with you," he shouted, his voice carrying through the chaos like a battle cry, resonating with a raw honesty that struck me deep. In a world where silence often ruled, he dared to speak. "Blake, don't," I shouted, my instinct flaring up, the urge to save drowning out my caution. He turned abruptly, a flicker of surprise merging with recognition above the chaos. "I have to end this," he whispered, barely audible but powerful. It was a declaration, a decision that encompassed not just the fear of that night, but all the conflicts and regrets he had buried. It terrified me to think that this might not just be about the debt that seemed to haunt him. It was an unshackling from a past he had never fully acknowledged, if synchronized with his resolve. I began to move. I pushed through the throng of bodies, each jolt of energy sending fresh pangs of fear coursing through me. I needed to trust that he was making the choice he needed to make. My heart raced as I surged forward, close enough now to see the tension etched across his face, the pain and the strength battling side by side. "Don't, Blake," I cried again, hoping to reach him, to connect across the tumultuous sea of emotions. But the words barely escaped my lips before the well-dressed man lunged at him, the clash echoing like thunder. I sprang forward, an instinctive need to intervene igniting every fiber of my being. "Stop," I shouted. The weight of that singular word felt like an anchor amid the chaos. And then, as quickly as the confrontation had erupted, the unexpected happened. A stranger, a woman dressed in a simple white dress, stepped between Blake and the men, her face devoid of fear, a beacon of calm. "You're not alone in this," she said, her voice steady and unwavering, somehow cutting through the chaos. "We will face this together." It jolted me, a fragment of hope piercing the dark turmoil surrounding us. Someone else was willing to stand by him, willing to defy the tide. But before I could process the potential of this small act of bravery, another gunshot rang out, echoing like a death knell through the club. Chaos erupted anew, and I felt the breath leave my lungs as I realized this was not just a fight for Blake's freedom, it was a battle for our very lives. "Get down," Vanessa screamed again, but everything felt surreal, time dragging, freezing as I watched Blake's eyes dart to meet mine. The connection was undeniable, a silent promise formed under the weight of uncertainty. He wasn't just facing this alone anymore. Just then, a blinding flash erupted near the entrance, and a beam of light sliced through the vibrant darkness of the club. The police? Or something worse? My heart raced as the realization dawned on hidden truths, the whispered secrets, all with the potential to intertwine our fates irrevocably, were about to reveal themselves. And in that moment, as the foundation of our choices teetered on the edge, I couldn't shake the feeling that what lay ahead would unravel more than just our circumstances. It would carve open the very essence of who we were and who we might become as shadows of the past began to rise, tangible, ready to engulf us all. The world shifted again, chaos swirling like a tempest around us. The blinding flash at the entrance grew brighter, and through my instinctive flinch, I caught sight of the police sirens wailing, officers rushing in, guns drawn, shouting commands. I barely processed their arrival. My focus was on Blake and the stranger whose courage radiated against the backdrop of terror. "Blake," I cried out, my voice cracking as adrenaline coursed through me. The suited men hesitated for just a moment, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of law enforcement, and in that hesitation lay the slimmest chance of escape. The woman's stance remained firm, fierce determination etched into her features, a stark contrast to the dread flooding the air around us. "Let's go," I shouted, urging Vanessa to move. But she hesitated, her instincts tangling with the need to protect both me and Blake. "He's making a choice. We can't interfere. His choice might just get him killed," I countered, desperation bubbling inside me. I could feel the weight of the moment, the resentment, heartbreak, and hidden fears all swirling into a storm within my chest. "I'm not leaving him." Blake hung in the balance, his gaze darting between the chaos surrounding him and the quiet strength of the faceless woman. I could see the battle raging within him, like fire meeting ice, a tug-of-war between survival and the ghosts that had haunted him for far too long. The moment shattered as yet another loud bang reverberated through the air, sending a shockwave of fear rippling across the crowd. I clutched at Vanessa, my heart racing as the scene erupted once more, the suited men grasping their weapons, the officers barking orders, and Blake frozen like a statue amidst it all. My head spun. I was teetering on the edge of that ever-present uncertainty, unsure of how I could possibly help. Then I saw Ida, quick movement in the corner of my eye, a flash of silver. I turned just as the white-dressed woman tackled Blake to the ground, her will a protective shield against the chaos that threatened to consume us all. I gasped, raw terror rushing through me again, the urge to reach out and wrap my arms around him. But all I could do was watch in horror. "Get down!" An officer barked, his voice slicing through the panic. I instinctively dropped to the floor, dragging Vanessa with me. My heart raced as the shooting poured for the volley of frustration and hostility, the high-stakes game we were unwitting participants in. Amidst the turmoil of bodies, desperate cries, and unholy screams, I caught a glimpse of Blake's face, smeared with dust and shock, and within his expression flickered something else, a resolve bubbling beneath the surface, giving birth to courage he hadn't shown before. I could see he was finally confronting the phantom that had chased him for too long, that debt looming like an insurmountable wall that the world shook around us. My heart surged with belief. "Blake!" I shouted again, willing him to see me, to know he wasn't alone. The memory of our shared laughter danced behind my eyes, the way his smile had ignited the room, dispelling shadows. My thoughts were spiraling toward the worst flashes of what could happen if he didn't break free from this messy entanglement, the moment lingering like a suffocating fog. Then, in a fleeting instant, when I thought I would lose him all forever, he braced himself, lifted his head, and shouted back, "I choose to fight." It was a declaration, not just to the men pursuing him, but to himself, a pact written in the language of defiance that struck a chord deep inside me. He was redeeming himself in this very moment. He was reclaiming his life. But then, the atmosphere tensed. The men responded, eyes cold and unflinching. One lunged forward, anger overcoming reason. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that it wasn't just Blake they wanted. Everything was spiraling into a disaster that none of us could control. The room oscillated around us, and suddenly it all felt muted again, as if the chaos had faded for just a breath. I caught Vanessa's eye, her shock mirroring my own, and I knew we had to act, to do something, to reach out as one against the tide. And just as I pushed forward, a shout from a distance caught my attention. An officer had caught sight of the well-dressed men, his shout sharp and commanding. "Freeze!" Hands where I can see them. But in the deafening symphony of spiraling panic, consequences unfolded before my very eyes. The concealed weapons flashed into view, and in that moment, I knew nothing was as it seemed. The men weren't merely thugs. They were tied to something deeper, a network of betrayal that transcended the chaos of this night. Panic gripped my chest as the sirens grew louder, blurring with the sounds of conflict. I realized, struck by a chilling revelation, that whatever played out tonight would unravel far beyond this moment. It would unearth secrets buried by fear and shame. And just then, amid the tumultuous cries, my gaze fell upon the woman in white, the faint outline of a tattoo peeking from beneath her sleeve, a symbol I recognized all too well, the emblem of a gang I thought had vanished long ago. My breath caught, and the reality of the night shifted drastically. It couldn't shake the feeling that we were all just pieces on a board controlled by unseen forces. "Blake!" I shouted again, the weight of the moment crashing down. Uncertainty dripped from every word. As shadows loomed over us, I felt the cavern of vulnerability expand, and I sensed the truth whisper like an echo. This battle was not just for our lives, it was for the very foundation of who we were destined to become. The world felt like it was unraveling before my eyes, chaos layering over itself like the strands of a fraying rope. The flashing lights of police cars painted stark shadows on the walls, illuminating the grim tableau we had walked into. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, an echo of what could be lost if we didn't act. "Blake!" I screamed, every ounce of desperation woven into my voice as I crawled toward him, forcing panic and fear into a tight ball in my chest. I could feel Vanessa's fingers gripping my arm, anchoring me, But her worried eyes told me the same terrible truth. Time was slipping away. The woman in white was still grappling with Blake, her body shielding him from the chaos that raged outside their small bubble. I struggled to comprehend her sudden appearance, her defiance shimmering like a spark of hope in a storm threatening to consume us all. But while she fought for his survival, it felt as if the wave of darkness encroached with every passing second, ready to overtake us. My mind raced, trying to piece together the symbols of betrayal my eyes had just witnessed. The tattoo, the emblem of a gang, I thought was nothing more than a ghost story whispered around campfires. But there it was, unmistakable, a tangible link to past horrors whose echo reverberated through the fabric of my memories, shaking loose the grains of dread I thought I had buried. Get up. We have to move, I urged, but every word felt heavy within the melee, burdened with the weight of uncertainty. Blake's gaze, carved with the weight of countless regrets, held mine for what felt like an eternity, a silent acknowledgement that we were standing on the precipice of a choice I wasn't certain we were ready to make. The chaos heightened as the men shouted defiance, the pointed threats pooling in the air like poison. It was all intertwined: the gang, Blake's past, and now our present threatened to slip through our fingers. Fear danced dangerously close, the fine line between survival and surrender hanging in the balance. I could sense it. The rules of our lives were being rewritten before our very eyes, and somehow, I felt responsible. My heart ached under the strain of guilt, a knife twisting each time Blake's expression darkened with doubt. A shot fired, a loud report that rang through the air softly yet brutally, and for a moment, fragmented silence enfolded us. Panic flooded my veins anew as I witnessed the police's frantic responses, officers blocking the exits, creating a full cage against our unfolding desperation. I caught a glimpse of Vanessa, her face pale, and it was like staring into a mirror reflecting my own spiraling fears. Suddenly, a gentle touch latched onto my shoulder. It was the woman in white. Her demeanor shifted, eyes softening as the chaos swirled around us. "This isn't over yet," she whispered, leaning in. "You're stronger than you realize. If Blake isn't ready yet, it's okay, you can support him. You can reach him." In that moment of vulnerability, she became a tether, a small flicker of reassurance in the tempest. But moments of hope began to fizzle as the suit-clad men hooted and jeered at the encroaching wall of law enforcement. I watched as fear morphed into fury in their eyes. They were not merely thugs, they were panicked animals caught in a trap. Blake met my eyes once more, barely a whisper of his former self flickering within. But the tentacled shadows of his past loomed, and I knew it was eating away at him, feeding the doubt that held him prisoner. I leaned closer, my voice low, meant only for him. "Blake, I need you to remember why we're here. Remember us. You can't lose yourself again." "Not this time." He nodded, just barely, and something shifted inside me. The warmth of our connection fought against the rising tide of chaos. If we could reach that sliver of trust, of shared strength, perhaps we could ignite the spark within him. But the constellations of fate felt misaligned, and I knew our moment of hesitation could cost us everything. Then, without warning, the suited men surged forward, primal instinct overtaking their calculated approaches. I felt the world tilt once more, every fiber of my being screaming for us to react. Just as I prepared myself to make a desperate dive for Blake, the police charged in, shields raised, and the scene exploded into confusion. Gunfire rang out, the echoes of survival and desperation ricocheting off the walls. I ducked as the air thickened with tension, the cries of the men bleeding into the night. Vanessa was beside me, shouting urgent instructions, but all I could focus on was Blake. Had he made his choice? Had the woman in white broken through, ignited the fire he so desperately needed? It was a chaotic symphony of raw panic, of fight, a struggle, and the overwhelming realization that our lives had been irrevocably altered in mere moments. Just as I scrambled to reach him, an unforeseen movement caught my eye, a shadow slipping past unseen as I fought to break free from the entangled mess. In that instant, a voice cut through the air, sharp and cold like an icy dagger. "Don't move. You're surrounded." And with that, the reality tumbled down like a house of cards. The stakes were higher than we ever imagined. The confrontation extended far beyond a mere escape. This was a reckoning, A collision of past mistakes threatening to swallow us whole. As chaos unfolded around me, I caught a glimpse of Blake, decision and fear flickering on his face once more as he grappled with his demons. I felt a tightening in my throat. Could we truly rally against the forces working against us? In a breath suspended between dread and fleeting hope, I knew we were on the cusp of something that could either free us or destroy us. The abyss yawned wide before us, and as the shadows coalesced, I realized we were far from the end of this fight. The chaos continued to unravel, each shouted command and gunshot reverberating off the walls as if the building itself were screaming in agony. Time felt treacherous, slipping through my fingers like the sand in an hourglass. Around us, figures swirled, and I struggled to gain my bearings as the noise crescendoed, drowning out coherent thoughts. "Blake, stay with me," I shouted, voice strained, my heart pounding as fear coiled tightly around my chest. His face, when I caught a glimpse amidst the turmoil, reflected not just uncertainty, but a torment that was palpable. It clawed at me, reminding me of the shadows that haunted him, shadows I had hoped we could leave behind. Just then, the woman in white broke from her defensive stance, a fierce determination etched across her features. Unlike the chaos which enveloped us, she seemed a beacon of clarity, resolute in her fight. With an instinct I didn't understand, she moved toward Blake, and for a split second, my panic froze. Would she stand in the line of fire for him? "Let him go," she commanded, voice steady, unwavering even as the world around us fractured into violence. The men, while died and frantic, seemed not to regard her as a serious threat, but heeding her words took an even darker turn, for they turned their rage toward her. "You think this is about him? It's bigger than you can imagine." I stood rooted to the spot, a swell of desperation threatening to sweep me away. I knew little of Blake's past, but the words rippling through the air suggested ripples. Something deeper, something dangerous was brewing beneath the surface of their confrontation. What horrors had he faced that now threatened him again? "Please, Blake," I whispered urgently, reaching out once more. "You have to fight. You have to choose us." The plea felt so weighty. I couldn't comprehend the possibility that he could choose differently, yet the reality of the past loomed ever closer. The moment hung between us like an unspooled thread, and with every beat of my heart, I could feel the risk crystallizing. Hope danced on the edge, flickering like a candle threatened by an impending gust. The gunfire rang out loudly, distorting the sounds of desperate shouts, transforming everything into a cacophony of fear and survival instincts. I could no longer tell where the danger was coming from, where it began, or when it would end. It was fleeting, a mere moment of connection, but in the depths of Blake's troubled gaze, I saw something shift. A flicker of flame reignited by my unwavering belief in him. But before I could celebrate the small moment of hope, he hesitated, and that hesitation felt as heavy as a mountain. Throughout it all, Vanessa remained at my side, echoing my sentiments, urging Blake to rise, yet her spirit was starting to dim. I could see it in her frown, that breathtaking light of determination giving way to concern. "We need to go. This isn't just about us." All at once, the sound of footsteps rushing towards us broke through the chaos. A new wave, marching with precision through the chaos. My body tensed, drawing back instinctively as I readied myself for yet another confrontation, another collision of futures intertwined with the past. The officers at the door, their uniforms crisp against the backdrop of chaos, were a jarring contrast. They filled the space and positioned themselves, guns drawn but faces firm with an urgency to end this nightmare. It was a confrontation I had feared. It signaled even deeper layers of betrayal and regret swirling beneath the surface. "Get down. Hands where I can see them," a commanding voice barked, cutting through the madness with a precision that sent chills racing through me. In those fleeting moments, I felt torn, split by what I believed was right. I wanted to trust the police, to believe that they would see our truth and safeguard us. But a gnawing memory clawed at the edges of my Minda paranoia, born of stories I'd heard too often about systems failing, about innocent lives taken in panic. I turned back to Blake, who now appeared to be teetering on that precipice with me. A tangle of emotions crossed his face, fear, love, and a deep-rooted sorrow I could not fully grasp. He stood between worlds, one side grim, edged in darkness marked by his past, the other anything but certain, yet filled with the possibility of a different life. Blake, listen, I urged as sirens wailed outside, their call a warning. You're stronger than you know. We have to go. You have to decide. And then he locked eyes with me, vulnerability cracking his composure, morphing into something raw and powerful. I can't, he choked, a whisper caught in the throes of despair. What if I lose myself again? In that crucial moment, I felt the earth shift slightly beneath me, our fragile connection sparking something new. You won't. You have to trust me. Trust yourself. I cried, wishing that those words alone could bridge the chasm of doubt that threatened to swallow him whole. Just then, out of the thrumming riot, a horrifying realization struck me. Blake wasn't just battling the men in the suits. He was grappling with something darker, his own identity, his past. And in that instant, I saw not just the silhouette of my boyfriend, but a man, alone in a storm, avoiding the lightning strikes that had seared him before. Suddenly, the noise crescendoed, the tension exploding into a harrowing crescendo as one of the suited men lunged toward Blake. In a surreal moment, I caught sight of the confrontation ghosting over his features, casting a long shadow on the man he had fought to be. But amid that chaos, Blake's hand flew up, not aiming at them, but catching mine, squeezing it tight, as if to say something unspoken. That grip was both a plea and an affirmation, a promise that together we could face whatever rose against us. But just as I thought we had forged our way through the shadows, the moment shattered. The gunshots rang out with ruthless intent, drowning us in dread. And as Blake's figure swayed against mine, I could almost see the strands of fate twist violently, threatening to tear us apart. That I gasped as the world hesitated, a breath caught in time before plummeting into chaos, revealing an image that would haunt meth woman in white fell, her movement graceful yet tragically abrupt, as if she were a wisp of smoke caught in a gust of wind. She crumpled to the floor, and with her, a myriad of secrets swirled in the air, threads of fate unraveling right before our eyes. That a gasp echoed, an unexpected sound cut sharply through my heart as the heavy layer of dread settled colder than ever. The realization sunk deep. This confrontation was far from over, and the choices we made tonight would echo indefinitely. The air suddenly felt heavier, the acrid scent of gunpowder intertwining with the stale sweat of panic as I knelt beside the woman in white. Her delicate frame, now lifeless against the cold, hard floor, was a stark reminder of everything at stake. I could see the fervor in the eyes of the gunslingers, now momentarily paralyzed by the shocking turn of events, their fury simmering just below the surface. "Stay down," the commanding officer shouted, his voice slicing through the chaos. But it felt hollow to me. Who could listen to such a command when the world around them was collapsing? Blake remained rooted, his back pressed against mine, yet I could feel the tremors racing through him, a mix of fear and guilt threatening to engulf him whole. "This is all my fault," he mumbled, eyes locked on the woman who had stood up for him. "If she hadn't intervened, no." "No, Blake, that's not true." I reached back, gripping his forearm, trying to pull him from the depths of despair that had begun to loose around him like ivy encroaching on an unguarded wall. "You don't get to carry this burden alone. Not now, not ever." There was an urgency in my voice, a desperate need to reach him, to anchor him amidst the treacherous seas of emotion that swirled chaotically in his eyes. But before he could respond, one of the men in suits let out a feral yell, rushing toward us as if possessed, driven by a dark determination. The crack of a gunshot rang out, ricocheting off the walls, causing us all to flinch. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, sharp and electric, yet haunted by the shadow of death that now lay still. "Get her out of here," screamed one of the officers, rushing past us and heading directly toward the chaos. "Evacuate the premises, now." My heart raced as I felt the surge of urgency swell. We were losing time, every second counted. "Blake," I urged again, my voice trembling, "we have to move. We can't stay here." I could see it then, the battle raging within him, a tempest of memories and feelings that tumbled forth with every heartbeat. Torn between running toward the unknown and accepting his past, Blake's struggle was visceral. What if she hadn't died for me? His voice cracked, and my heart ached for him. What if I am so broken that I can't even save myself? As he spoke, I sensed a shift was holding onto a thread of self-loathing that threatened to pull him under completely. It was no longer just about the danger surrounding us. It was about his very identity, the pieces of himself he feared would never heal. But then, as if to counteract the despair, a flicker of light glimmered among the shadows. There was a fellow officer, a young man with kind eyes and a careful demeanor, who offered Blake a nod of encouragement, as if silently affirming the worth he still held. It was a subtle reminder that even in the darkest moments, glimmers of humanity could shine through. "Blake, look at me," I insisted, trying to infuse a sense of urgency into his fading spirit. "You are not defined by your past or anyone else's choices. We can do this together. Let's honor her memory not just with words, but with action." Just then, Vanessa, who had remained partly shielded throughout this ordeal, stepped into view. "You know what they say," she called out, her voice gaining strength despite the chaos. "They say that when someone passes in combat, it's up to us to carry on their spirit. She believed in you, Blake. We believe in you." Caught in a gust of fierce emotion, he hesitated before nodding slowly, a flicker of resolve igniting in his chest. But before we could act, another gunshot pierced the air, a sound that somehow morphed into a desperate scream, echoing through the tumult. "Go, go, go." The officer shouted again, breaking through our moment of connection. The sirens outside wailed louder, the cacophony of chaos encroaching upon us with pixel-smudged reality. In a rush, we moved, propelled by a potent combination of survival and will. I reached for Blake's hand, intertwining our fingers, desperate for that connection to ground him. We ducked low and navigated through the debris, hearts pounding as fear propelled us down hallways fraught with uncertainty. The world outside felt distant, the knowledge of the woman's sacrifice encased in our minds as we pressed onward, each step a tribute to a life lost too soon. Through a narrow doorway, we stumbled into a dimly lit alley outside, the cool night air salvaging some of the anxiety that had congealed in the back of my throat. But no sooner had we stepped into the fragile solace of the street than we saw them, figures in the darkness, illuminated by the unyielding glow of streetlights. "Wait," Blake gasped, drawing me back, his eyes wide with fear. I followed his gaze, my heart sinking as the shadows revealed more men in suits, lurking with intent. "Waiting. No, not now," I choked, knowing deep in my bones that our confrontation was spiraling into something darker, something out of our control. The moment crystallized as the realization loomed over us that, while we might have escaped the immediate danger, a greater storm still approached, its echoes battering steadily against walls we had yet to build. And just then, as the shadows charged closer, I caught sight of a familiar face among them. A face that twisted my stomach into knots, a figure from Blake's past. One whose mere presence promised a revelation that could infer damage, a reckoning that I felt I might not be prepared to face. As the night closed in around us, I gripped Blake's hand tighter, bracing for the tide that threatened to sweep over us. Whatever lay ahead could not be merely a fight against the past, but a battle for our very future. After what felt like an eternity, the chaos receded into a haunting stillness, leaving shattered echoes reverberating through the cold night air. I felt like I was standing at the edge of an abyss, looking into the depths of what might have been. The incessant thrum of police sirens faded into the background, and for the first time, I could focus on the dim light of the street lamp illuminating Blake's face, a face torn between despair and determination. "What now?" he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips, his vulnerability raw and palpable as he searched my eyes for answers. What could I possibly say to ease the weight of his heart when my own felt so heavy? "You fight," I replied, my voice resolute despite the tremor within. "You fight for your future, for the person you want to be. We both do." He stared at me, confusion sparking in his blue eyes, a longing for comfort battling against the ghosts of his past. "But I can't. Not when there's so much darkness inside me." I stepped closer, letting the cool night air surround us like a protective cloak. "That darkness doesn't define you, Blake. Everyone has their demons, but it's what you do in their presence that shapes who you truly are. You choose to face them or let them dictate your future." A shadow flickered across his expression, something like understanding shining amid the confusion that clouded his features. Then, without warning, He turned away, frustration boiling within him like a storm at sea. It's not that easy. What if I fail again? What if I can't change? I watched as he wrestled with his demons, my heart aching for the storm raging within him. He felt trapped in a cycle of shame, a feeling I knew all too well. What if you soar? What if you break free from the chains that bind you? You can't know unless you tried. He clenched his jaw, a tumult of emotions reflected in the tightening of his features. But I kept my gaze steady, unwavering. Remember that woman? The one who stepped in for you just before my voice faltered momentarily at the revelation. The realization hit us both like a wave crashing against the shore. She had stood up for him, risking everything to shield him from a fate that was not entirely his own. I could see that truth shifting in the way he mirrored her courage in that defining moment. Blake swallowed hard before meeting my gaze again, vulnerability spilling into the air between us. What happens if I can't make it right for her? If I don't have the strength? Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, and I stepped closer, allowing the warmth of my presence to remind him that he was not alone. You honor her by choosing to live, by breaking the cycle of who you were and embracing who you can be. That is your power. The stillness hung between us, potent and charged, as I waited for something to shift within him. I knew I couldn't provide him with the answer or the strength he was searching for, but perhaps I could light a path through the doubt. And then it happened, the flicker of hope igniting in his eyes as he reached for my hand, finally accepting that it was okay to feel lost, but not to remain there. His fingers intertwined with mine, an anchor in the turbulence of our shared history. That I want to try, he said softly, the weight of his confession reverberating with sincerity. The determination that had been absent moments before shone through his gaze, illuminating the path ahead. I want to fight for myself, for us. With a deep breath that steadied my quaking heart, I nodded. We'll figure it out, step by step. I'm here with you, every step of the way. Just then, a cacophony of voices erupted from a distance, police officers responding to the mayhem that had left us staggered. The shadows of men in suits still lurked nearby, but their expressions shifted now, acknowledging our defiance, as if recognizing that in unity, we held a strength that no individual force could shatter. The atmosphere was pungent with fear, but also with newfound resolve. I glanced at the alley that lay ahead, and Blake followed my gaze, uncertainty still lingering but softened by the tether we had forged. I can't go back to who I was, he said, each syllable laden with meaning. And I won't know, I affirmed, voice steady and unwavering. What lies ahead will be shaped by our choices. Together, as the officers closed in, circling like a formidable fortress, Blake squeezed my hand. I felt the surge of collective courage swell between us, an invisible bond linking our destinies in that fleeting moment while the chaos pulsed around us like the beat of a heart. With a shared nod, we turned toward the world that awaited us, our uncertain yet resolute steps faltering beneath the weight of the past. And as we prepared to face the tide of challenges that would surely come, I heard Blake's voiciest sound unburdened by the weight of hesitation. I'm ready, he said, a proclamation heavier than any burden he'd carried before. Let's rise from the ashes. As we stepped forward, shadows receding behind us, I understood that in this journey of redemption, we carried not only the scars, but also the hope of tomorrow. In that moment, I realized life was not merely about what we faced, but how we faced it. And together, we could carve a new path through the darkness illuminated by the flicker of unwavering hope. No longer alone, we embraced our future, ready to rise from the ashes like the phoenix we were destined to become. And as I turned, locking eyes with Blake one last time, surrendering to the fear and hope intertwined, the last flicker of doubt faded away, leaving behind only the soft whisper of promise. Together, we will always find our way.